Hello, hello, hello. Live from Denver. It's Friday night. Welcome to another episode of Critical Conversations. Let me just make sure that, looks like all is well. Welcome, critics, to another episode here this week. I'm very excited to be here on this Cinco de Mayo, 5th of May, the day after Star Wars Day, the 4th of May. May the 4th be with you. So we had a lot of things happen this week that I'm going to comment on or talk about here. As you can see, I am not joined by my beautiful wife, Melissa, this week. That is totally fine. She's taken the night off, and we're going to let her. I see all of my lovely critics in the comment section here. Very happy to be joined by all of you. And we'll just let everybody kind of get on board here as we go. Of course, I have my Post-it notes of glory here in front of me, all my little things to discuss here tonight. And you might have noticed that lately I am drinking the Kool-Aid. Literally, I still drink my sodas, but it's I don't know. I've also been this last couple months we've been switching over to drinking. I know, it's funny. We've been switching over to drinking a lot of Kool-Aid, and I'm pretty sure Flavor Aid, which is actually the drink that was drunk at Jonestown, breathed a big sigh of relief that it was that everybody thought it was Kool-Aid when in fact it was Flavor Aid that they were drinking down there in Guyana. Anyway, the Kool-Aid is back. So, okay, so where to start? So many things. So yes, happy Cinco de Mayo for those who are celebrating. I believe that's basically the equivalent of Spanish Independence Day. It's the celebration of them having conquered an invading French army in the 1800s and overwhelming odds apparently, and they beat them, and so they have this celebratory day. But I do have, to get things kicked off here, I do have a quote of the week for you guys. And I looked this one up myself. I'm never as good at this as Mel is, but I hope you guys will like this one. This is a quote by, remember Walden, Henry David Thoreau? Well, he's, kind of a philosopher, writer kind of guy. Here's the quote. What you get by achieving your goals is not as important as what you become by achieving your goals. I thought that was a pretty sharp quote. I thought that was pretty spot on and speaks an awful lot to that whole thing I was breaking down a couple weeks ago about our emotional needs and our morality and our thinking and rationality. And I think there's a lot there in that. Is money a goal or jewels is gold? Well, only in that it can give you maybe some peace of mind, but is it really, there's a certain point where I think our needs are fulfilled, and then is it not really emotionally satisfying? Is it really the goal, or is there something deeper, further, better to be gotten there? That's how I kind of think about that quote. Of course, having some money isn't bad either, but of course we're talking about, it's funny how once I started thinking and formulating things around this idea of emotional needs, and sort of that really comes out of that old, that concept of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And of course, so many of us these days are struggling with even our basic needs, the bottom of that pyramid, the food and shelter and transport and things like that it's hard to talk in lofty terms about these higher level needs. But, we are also, for the most part, folks who are watching this show are in a place where they can address those higher needs. And I think those are very, very important on the road to whatever kind of self-actualization you're trying to achieve. Boy, what a week. So let's also, just following my little list here. We do have some Benson cam for you, so let's go ahead and pop that on. Turn on our Snuggles Not Struggles cam here, as I like to call it now. Great viewer suggestion that came from. And there's our little bundle of joy, our little fur baby. He's just sitting on the couch right now, totally chilling. That's probably what he's doing right this second as well. It's not a live feed, but that's probably what he's doing over there with Mel right now, is just kind of chilling out. Some days he is this, actually, some times of the day, he becomes this fantastic, frantic ball of energy. And then other times of the day, after he's sort of, blown all that energy, he just becomes the laziest little critter, and he just sits there and soaks up, the air or whatever, or the sun, and you can barely move him. He just loves hanging around there and chilling out, and he'll snuggle up with you. I mean, he really does. It's really snuggles, not struggles, is really the thing, because he will come up, and if I'm sitting on the couch, like after the show here tonight, he'll just come up and snuggle right up against me. Love that dog. Yes. No, Henny, that's a great point. It's a great point. Henny says here, reaching goals is wonderful to achieve, but appreciating the now is far more important. As far too often, goals are hard to attain, especially in our materialistic age, I suppose, that we live in. Sorry to pontificate. No, not at all, Henny. That's a very, very good sentiment, and I don't feel pontificated at all. Darla, thank you very much for that super chat. Very, very appreciated. Yeah, when life hits you low, you hit back high, and that actually might be a nice way of sort of theming a few things we're going to talk about tonight when we get to the main topic. But I did have a few things I wanted to go over first, just some things to kind of let you all know about. I'm not going to be able to say a lot about this, but I wanted to let you guys know something exciting that happened this week, as I was flown to a location to be part of a documentary about Scientology. This was a European documentary, and I was interviewed. It was awesome. It was a lot of fun. The traveling was not particularly fun, but the interview was, and apparently I gave some pretty decent quotes and information about Scientology and its caustic, toxic practices, and how it's formulated, and why, and what the Sea organization is all about. We went pretty deep on a lot of stuff. This is an attempt on this documentarian's part to put together a sort of short form, one shot. Here's Scientology, right? Here's what it is at its core. And so I was very, very happy to be asked to be part of that. Yeah, there were other people also in it that you'll know, who I won't name right now, because I don't know how much I want to say about this. I don't know how much of a heads up I want to give the church about this, because I don't know what they do or don't know about this. But it is another exciting endeavor in exposing the abuses of the cult of Scientology. We can say the Church of Scientology, of course. They are a church, but of course they're also not, if we're being really honest. And speaking of, yeah, I don't know about that, Debbie, in terms of why he went to Walden, but I do know that he went there. Okay, so Masterson trial. You're going to hear me, and Tony, of course, will be recording our show on Sunday, and that'll go down on Monday, for talking about what happened this last week, so I won't go into a lot of detail. But Claire Headley testified as an expert witness on Scientology. I thought she did a great job. Kind of duking it out with Sean Hawley, the defense attorney from OJ's Dream Team. That's how we know her, and she's definitely been competent, so far in this thing. I wish we had, obviously some indication or window into what the jury thinks, because all of our thoughts and feelings and ideas about this are really so much hot air. It's really just, what does the jury, what are they taking in on this? But what we do see is a much better presented case, I believe. My evaluation as a lay person is we're seeing a much better layout of the case and the chronology of events and the importance of the events, the details of the events, told in a narrative with visuals and with testimony that makes sense. You can follow how it went down, how awful these things were. These women are incredibly brave to have to testify yet again to this. This really will be it, and we really do hope that this goes all the way through. And then, of course, they're going to have the civil trial to deal with also, because it's come up in testimony. Now that Judge Almeida has opened the door to so much more Scientology and its influence on this case in terms of its cover-up actions, now we're seeing so many more details emerge in the testimony about those cover-ups and about the intimidation and the current present day stalking and nonsense that the church gets up to in fair gaming these women and the people around them. It is truly toxic what this organization will do. And also, the thing that actually gets really gets me about it more so than anything is just how vindictively stupid all of those fair game tactics actually are. They're not changing or going to change anything about what's already happened or what is happening. These women are clearly not going to be intimidated into silence. They are just making their lives hell for no other reason than Scientology can. And it really, between that and what we're seeing on the social media from Scientology these days, we are seeing some really overt, blatant, antagonistic hostility towards Leah, Mike. I mean, in a way that to me seems even more ramped up than what we've seen in the past, with the attacks on Tony Ortega, on Mike Rinder, on Leah Remini, on the real world attacks on the victims of Danny Masterson. I mean, why would they engage in all of this if their hands were not filthy, dirty with blood? And that is clearly, it's just so obvious. It's so obvious. And so stupid and useless to be doing what they're doing. It's senseless, really. And I really feel for, these victims, and I really want them to get the justice that they deserve on this, which is, probably why I would have been the worst possible expert testimony if I had, tried to do that. Claire did wonderfully at that job, and I'm very happy with how that came out. And like I said, we'll talk more about that when I talk with Tony. All right, but I just wanted to give a little summation of some of my thoughts about that this week. Yes, thank you guys. Thank you very much for these wonderful comments you guys are giving. Henny, sorry you're losing signal. I think that's a local thing because I'm watching here and it looks like it's coming in just fine. Yes, there has been more coverage of this in the media now that this retrial is going. We're seeing NBC, CNBC, CNN. I mean, major media is reporting on this Masterson case, as well as, of course, the celebrity media. And yeah, I really do think Tony's been doing a championship job. And again, I will say, this is all I'm going to say about this part is, my own personal opinions or takes on other content creators aside, the coverage of this has been really, pretty good so far. I don't watch anything else. I just pretty much read Tony's reporting for the most part. I'm not trying to watch everything by everybody. I just don't have the time or the interest to do that, really. I've got too much of my own time spent on my own stuff. But I don't begrudge anybody for what they're doing in trying to expose Scientology and trying to get the truth out about this. I need to say that over and over again because I have had my personal animosities enter into that from time to time on social media, and that's just my take, and whatever. It is what it is. Okay, so now I had some thoughts. I had some things I wanted to share. Now, this is a difficult thing. This is a little bit difficult to talk about because it can get into the weeds real easily, or we can get into some kind of academic crap or some philosophical crap, and I don't really want to go there. I want to keep this interesting for you guys, and I wanted to talk about something that is on my mind about Well, myself, this is all coming out of some things I was thinking and experiencing recently, and thinking I wanted to share them with you. And maybe the food, maybe my thinking or my processing of this, or how I have sort of changed my views on a couple things. Maybe it might be food for thought for you guys. That's kind of how I'm approaching this. And we'll take calls, in the second half of the show. And hopefully I'll hear from you guys on this too. But I made some notes here, and I wanted to talk about something. It came up this week on social media. It was on my Twitter feed that I was reminded of an attitude I used to have or have had toward Nazis, of all things. And this was the sort of spark that got the whole thing going. Is, Nazis are just universally reviled, and clearly deservedly so. There is no such thing as a good Nazi. The entire concept of Nazism and the practice of it is nothing but destructive to whole swaths of our population. They're by intent, by design. It's not a government system. It's not a way of running a country. It's a philosophy of death and destruction, and it's awful. And anybody who ascribes to it clearly is ascribing to that. There's no bright side to it. There's no good side to it. There isn't anything about it that you look at and go, oh yeah, no, but they kind of had a point about this, or, oh, well, Mussolini got the trains running. Now Italy was fascism. It was a little slightly different, and I don't pretend to be a historical expert here, but clearly Italy was on its own thing. But Nazism is a German invention, a Hitler invention, and I'm just making the point that there are things out there that are just all bad. There just isn't anything good about them. There's nothing. There's no redeeming qualities, you could say, to be found in Nazism. And this kind of sparked some thinking on my part, because I don't know if y'all remember, a couple years ago, I think it was summer 2020. It might have been around that time when we were Charlottesville, maybe pre 2020. I can't remember exactly when that whole Charlottesville disaster happened. I'm not going to look it up right now. Just y'all remember when they were marching with the tiki torches and the tan pants and that whole thing. A woman ended up getting run over, dying at that place, and it was pretty bad. It was this whole rally of all these white supremacist and Nazi groups and other unsavory elements were all gathered together to do this mass protest and demonstrations, and it was awful. And around that time, there was a meme circulating about punch a Nazi, punch a Nazi, just go give it to him. And I reacted negatively to that at that time. I was like, I don't know that that's a good idea. I don't think that's a really good idea. I don't think we should be practicing violence towards these people, because it's just not really going to help anything. It's not really the right thing to do, And I don't come at this right now as though I'm poo-pooing that. I know exactly what I was thinking, and we'll kind of go through a little bit of a circle here tonight in my thinking on this. But 2017, I believe Daniel says, yeah, probably true. So that whole punch a Nazi thing was something I was not really getting behind, even though viscerally, emotionally, I was 100% behind it, right? I mean, of course, Indiana Jones is, of course, one of my heroes. I grew up on that. And, punching Nazis was what he was all about. And, of course, when you see a movie like Schindler's List, or you go and you look to the history, or you open up your Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, the first and pretty much only thing you want to do throughout reading all of that material or consuming any of it is you want to go punch a Nazi. And that's, at least that's what you want to do. So it seems like a very, very natural, very organic thing to want to go do. But it got me thinking about rights, because while I never thought to defend Nazis or, try to get into arguments with people about that, I did kind of argue a little bit about the whole punch a Nazi thing. I said, it's not really a good idea. I'm really down on that. And of course, I got a lot of kickback on that. So I was looking at this last week. Here it was again. Here's some guy on social media going, hey, man, Nazis have just as many rights as you do to speak and think and believe what they want. And if they're not hurting anybody, then what's the problem? And it's, of course, you're kind of like, dude, you're talking about Nazis right now. You're not talking about, liberals or conservatives or people who have, or theists versus non-theists, or, these much more nuanced, much more spectrum-based concepts or ideas where there are good and bad and right and wrong. And you can find examples of all of this. You can find good liberals and you can find bad liberals. You can find good conservatives and bad conservatives. I mean, of course you can, right? By any metric, by any moral standard you want to use, you can find these things. You can't find any good Nazis. I'm sorry, but you're just not going to. And that's an assertion I'm making. I'm saying straight up, that's how I see it. I'm sure there are, some Nazis out there who might disagree with me, but fuck them. So yeah, there are people I've actually what was his name? There was a man from Europe I interviewed on my podcast years ago who used to be a skinhead and was following in neo-Nazi footsteps, I really believe. And I'd have to look it up. His name is Robert Orley. I think that's what it was. And he and I had a fascinating discussion about deconverting Nazis and going in and actually dealing with and intervening in that, or helping people who had deconverted or who had had a wake-up call, had an epiphany, and went, Jesus, I'm the bad guy. Oh my God, I need to stop being a Nazi, right? That happens. I mean, it's not like a full commitment where there's no turning back. There is redemption possible for for people who haven't yet gone all the way down that path. Anyway, you guys might check that podcast out. You have to look it up. It was probably 5 years ago or something I talked with him, but it was a fascinating conversation. Anyway, where I'm going with this is that here's this person defending their right to exist, their right to believe what they want, their right to speak publicly about their beliefs and ideas. And he was getting nothing but pushback on this. And I thought to myself, back to how I felt back in 2017, how I felt, back when it was more, where I was coming from. It was from a place of okay, well, let's be objective. Let's be rational. Let's be good critical thinkers. And obviously the critical thinking on Nazis has been done. We don't have to redo that. They like I said, they're bad. But the subject of rights and critical thinking and rational, objective views about rights and that conversation, that's an important conversation. That's what we're going to kind of circle around here today is, here's this guy going, well, look, the rights are still there. And a bunch of people are like, yeah, no. And that's what kind of got me thinking was, because of course this leads directly in my mind, the dots connect almost immediately to Scientology. Now, Scientology, of course, is not Nazis. It's not even remotely the same. It's a much lesser grade of awful than what the Nazis do. I mean, because history, right? I mean, do I really need to make that case? So, but in my mind, of course, these things start connecting because I don't see, and here's why. In the Church of Scientology and with the practices of Scientology and with the goals of Scientology, not their stated PR fluff, not their window dressing. I'm talking about what we've talked about, the real goals, the real purpose of Scientology, even down to the occult practices and the occult beliefs that L. Ron Hubbard based it all on, going back to Crowley and Blavatsky and all that. We've connected those dots. When you look at Scientology at its core, when you look at what it's really doing, not what it says it's doing, you're dealing with a pretty evil practice. You're dealing with something that is deceptive and authoritarian and a premeditated effort to overwhelm and enslave minds. That is not that's not an exaggeration or an overstatement of the facts. That is what Scientology is really all about. Pretty bad stuff, right? It's not good. And that's why the dots connect for me right away. I don't see good in Scientology. I will acknowledge that there are things that people have done in Scientology that they claim they got benefit from, including myself. I can say that without feeling hypocritical about then saying it's still all bad, because you can get every one of those benefits without any of the destructive elements, without any of the deception, without any of the bullshit or the authoritarian control structures. Other places in the world, there is not one thing Scientology can or will ever be able to do for you that you can't get better, easier, and faster somewhere else. So the benefit side of that is an argument that doesn't hold any water for me as an ex. And this is 10 years out. This is going up and down and looking at this from every single perspective I could possibly find and arguing it both pro and against, right? I have made arguments about the benefits of Scientology at certain times. I've made arguments. You might have seen that podcast I did maybe a year or so ago with John Atack, where we even had some disagreements about L. Ron Hubbard's character, and maybe he did have a good side, or maybe he was trying to do some good, and John was like very, very blunt about it. John Atack was great for this, and he was just straight up, okay, Chris, got it. Show me the evidence. Show me where L. Ron Hubbard was actually a good guy. Show me where he had good intent. And of course, other than some anecdotes from a few old Sea Org members, there was nothing. And there's plenty of evidence to the contrary. So it really is an argument that is very, very difficult to make credibly, that there is good in Scientology, that there is something really beneficial there that we really need to hold on to. I don't really see it that way at this point. And I know that this runs into what other people think about it, and I get that. It's just my take on it. Okay, so yeah, of course. And of course we're gonna, and I know that other people have different ideas about that. And I don't think that they're deluded, idiot, stupid people. They are well-considered ideas. I just look at it from a different angle, because for me, I look at everything we've talked about, the psychological mechanisms and the intent behind them, and I see nothing but a manipulative, deceptive practice. So that's why the dots connect with Scientology and Nazism, not because of the genocide, not because of the murders, not because, if Scientologists had their way, they'd be armed and rounding up whole swaths of the population. Although, let's be clear, if you a literal interpretation or a deep reading of L. Ron Hubbard's works will lead in that direction. Maybe Scientologists aren't doing that right now because they don't have any power to. They don't hold enough sway or influence to be able to round up all the ones, all the covertly hostile people, all the perverts, all the LGBTQ, all of the critics of Scientology. If they had their way, would they? Yeah, they would. And this is why we say if Scientology were to take over a country, it would look just like North Korea. That's how they would run it. They would not be able to help themselves but run it that way. And the people in charge would be the ones making the rules, and the people not in charge would be the ones suffering. And if you weren't getting on board with Scientology, you would be at the bottom of the ladder. And yeah, things could get really ugly really, really fast. And Scientology has that potential. Just because that potential hasn't been realized doesn't mean it's not there, or that I'm making things up. Go look at the book Science of Survival. L. Ron Hubbard is crystal clear about using examples out of history about rounding up lepers in Venezuela and blowing them up and thinking that was a good thing, and that the only people who should have rights are clears in Scientology, or the unaberrated. Right, and this is where we're going to get to today, is where this drawing these lines in the sand on rights. And this and the morality of that. Okay, so so I was resisting the violent aspect of Punch a Nazi for obvious reasons. I'm not a violent guy. You guys know that I have always been kind of anti-hardcore. Let's go confront the Scientologists. Let's go get in their face. Let's go antagonize them. Let's go be hostile to them. You know I don't like that. That's just not productive or conducive of deconverting them. It doesn't work that way. So that's why I've always pushed back on that. And so we have this idea that human rights, right? Human rights and civil rights and the rights that are afforded to us in our Constitution. These are all, these things we think about that we have the ability to do or that are ingrained in us or that we recognize legally as, this is what you can do, or you have a right to exist. You have a right to think the way you want to. You have a right to speak your mind. These are our rights. These are very important. We don't have to get into deep philosophical conversations about it to know we got rights. But what about though, here was the thing, here was the conflict, here was the crux of the conflict for me is, what about when those guys, I want to recognize human rights. I want to recognize that every single human being should have an existential right and a right to thinking and speaking and traveling and motion, movement and that kind of thing. But what about when the people you're arguing with or that you're confronted by don't want that? And this is an argument that's made, and it's logically, it holds some water. Well, if they're not going to afford you those same rights, why would you afford them those rights? Why would you do that? By what standard would you do that? Because they, given their druthers, if you give the Nazis or the Scientologists all the power, what are they going to do with it? Are they going to recognize your rights? Are they going to give you an attaboy for standing up for them? Are they going to, or for rights in general? No, of course not. They're going to line you up and against the wall, or they're going to drag you down to the camps, or they're going to persecute you because you are not them. You are other. You are one of the other. And you don't deserve rights, see, because you're the other. That's where it comes from. I mean, this is the heart of us versus them. This is the heart of cultic thinking is, we have the rights, you don't have the rights. You don't get any of those rights. Or we'll dish out a few rights to you, but we're the ones who are either morally superior, logically superior, psychologically superior, legally superior, by whatever standard they're using. They're in charge, they're higher, they're better. You're worse, you're lower, you're not as good, you are the other, and therefore you don't deserve to have the same rights we have. And if you're kind of following along here, then you know that if we start thinking that way about Nazis, then we're doing that too. Whoa, there's a little moral dilemma. So what about when they don't want you to have those rights, though? Do they then give up, or do they then no longer deserve to have that recognition of those rights? Well, this is where the topic of the show comes from, on taking a stand, because I used to sort of try to be this sort of objective, neutral person, but then I realized something more difficult, even more of a problem for me and for others, which is, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. I really think that's a powerful statement. If you don't stand for something, you can fall for anything. If you can't take a stand against Nazis, if you can't take a stand against Scientologists, then what are you doing? And maybe a relatively benign example, not benign at all, but maybe a lesser example than Nazis here is, these religious scholars who view Scientology neutrally or try to believe they are viewing Scientology objectively as a new religious movement. And all new religious movements have their phases of abuse and growth and construction. And of course, you have to break a few eggs to build your omelet, right? If you're going to build a better religion, then, there's going to be growing pains. And of course, there's going to be problems and abuses along the way. And they take this as a given and give groups like Scientology a pass uninspected. They don't even really look. They don't really go into the details about what Scientology is really doing or what its real practices are about. They just believe all the PR. They take a few pamphlets. They take a tour of a church, all prearranged, of course. They talk to a few Scientologists, all prearranged, of course. And they come away going, it was exactly what I thought it was, because they were given a picture and information that aligned with what they thought it was, and they didn't think about it. They didn't have to think about it. They were invited not to think about it, and they said, yes, absolutely, I'm definitely not going to think about this. I'm going to take your promotional materials, I'm going to take your literature, and I'm going to go write my academic paper that praises Scientology for all of its good works and its front groups and its celebrities and all of the good that Scientology supposedly does. And this is how new religious movement scholars approach this subject. And their stand is First Amendment, is freedom of religion. If they're taking a stand at all, if they're bothering to think about this at all, they're thinking about it from that perspective, that all groups have a blanket right to do whatever they want and to exist however they want, because that's religion. And religion is not up to you or me or anybody else to judge or have opinions about. No, they have a full right to exist. And this kind of smacks of that same argument that you hear with the Nazis, right? Well, they have a right to exist. They have, technically speaking, that's very true. Technically, literally speaking, yeah, but unexamined. They're not really looking at what the group is really all about. World War II was basically all about the fact that Nazi Germany didn't have the right to exist. And Nazi Italy and Nazi Japan, or, Imperial Japan, didn't either. Because look what they were doing. Those actions, that what you do with your rights matter. Because with every single right that we have come responsibilities. And if you don't acknowledge those responsibilities, if you fluff off those responsibilities, if you think those don't have anything to do with you or me or thee, then that's where we start going, I wonder if you actually deserve those rights or not. Because look what you're doing with them. You're abusing people, you're killing people, you're harming people, right? And what's the whole point of rights? For people to live. For people to succeed, for people to have a shot, for at least for there to be some kind of playing field where people could have a chance of succeeding. And here's groups of people, Scientology, Nazis, whatever, who take those rights away from people. So the point is that you got to stand for something. You got to stand against that kind of thing. And I don't think it's hypocritical to take that stand and say, this is wrong. This is bad. This is not okay. We're not going to allow this. And yet still recognize this other thing about rights. And there's a reason for this. Morals change over time. Don't know if y'all noticed that. Right? They change. Our rules, our ideas of what's right and wrong, good and bad, change. Certain ones don't, particularly. And some of them hold over the test of time. And this is what we codify into our laws. And laws have been pretty not stable, not always the same, right? They've changed with culture and with time. And kind of proving my point, really. But those are the most permanent record we have of cultural moral change, is the laws. What is everybody kind of on the same page on as far as what's okay and what's not okay? Killing people is generally frowned upon. Stealing, taking people's stuff, generally not okay, right? There's very few exceptions, I think, in history where you're going to find that it's okay to just go take somebody else's stuff. and walk away scot-free, right? Or go kill somebody, or kill their kid, or that kind of thing, or assault their wife and walk away unscathed. Those kind of things generally have always held true for us in one way or another. So there are certain standards, certain things that we can all kind of always agree upon as not okay behavior. But when it gets into the niceties and the details, that's where the devil comes in, right? Because there are all kinds of circumstances where we're perfectly okay with killing somebody. Totally okay with it. Throughout the United States, there are different states have different laws about this. Castle laws, right? Home protection laws, things like that. This is why every single state has their own system. So when you look at so this question comes to mind right away when you start thinking about the changing nature of our moral system is, well, damn. So just because I'm so sure right now that I'm right, am I going to be tomorrow? Or next year? Or 10 years from now? Just to offer myself as an example again, 10 years ago, you guys would not have liked me. Maybe I should say 12 years ago. When I was still in Scientology, when I was still a Sea Org member, when I was still somebody who subscribed to a set of rules and beliefs and morals that were radically different than where I'm at now. You've watched, if you've been watching my channel for any length of time, you've watched that change. We could call it growth. We can call it progress because it's more in alignment with, what we all think in the big wide world versus what they think in Scientology. But I used to subscribe all the way to what Scientology believes. And it was a very different scale of good and bad and right and wrong. I used to actually believe that the LGBTQ community, that's mentally disturbed behavior. That's perverted. It's awful. It's wrong. It's a kind of insanity, and it needs to be done away with. I used to think that if you took all the psychiatrists and lined them up against a wall and shot them with AKs or ARs, that was justified behavior because that's what they're doing. The psychs are all murderers, see? And from that point of view, it justified, well, let's just take out the psychs. Now, of course, I see a psych. Now I'm in treatment. Now my whole world is opposite world from that moralistic standpoint. And those were hills I would have died on. Those were not small points for me. Those were very important points. That was all about how we were going to save the world, was get rid of the goddamn psychs. Get rid of all the perverts and the crazy people and the ones. They're the ones who are holding everything back. That's why we got to get rid of them. And I didn't have murder in my heart particularly. I wasn't necessarily walking around thinking kill, kill, kill. But I was certainly thinking we need to change these people forcefully. And if they won't change, well, we got a lot of prisons. Can you imagine being locked up for the crime of being a psychiatrist or the crime of being gay? Yeah, of course you can, because that kind of thing happens in the world. And that was the moral code that I used to subscribe to. And I'm only harping on this to make the point of what radical change a person can make over a relatively short period of time. And so the tough question here is, which one of those was right? Because at the time, 10 years ago, 12 years ago, I would have argued just as passionately as I'm arguing right now for those beliefs, for those ideas. I was right and I knew it. And I had reasons. I had logical, evidence-based reasons to believe what I believed. I was absolutely sure I was right. And I was part of a group of people, and we were all sure we were right. All of us, all the Scientologists, we would gather at events, we would clap and applaud, standing ovations at the campaigns to go take out the psychs. Psychiatry, global annihilation. I will never forget that campaign. Right? We were going to eradicate psychiatry from the face of the earth, and that was a good thing to do. We all believed it, and Scientologists still believe it. Well, now I've changed my mind about that in the most radical way possible. So which version of me had it right? Has it right? Well, I tend to think now that I'm right now. Of course, right? And you all pretty much agree with me, which is why you tune into my channel, is because, this is a more realistic, more evidence-based, more real-world view of how things are than it was in the bubble world of Scientology. But the point is that you can't judge based on how sure you are as to whether you're right or wrong. That almost has nothing to do with it. But it's the number one standard we all use to judge whether we're on the side of good or bad. That and social agreement, right? Do my friends, do my family, do my groups agree with me on this? Good, I'm on solid ground, right? I got agreement. Everybody's on board. So I'm on the side of right. And I'm just letting you all know, in Scientology, they feel the exact same way about a set of moral values that are unhinged. But the emotional component of that is the same. And that's kind of scary. It's a little bit like, wow. And that's why out here on this side, of course, we are all having to and see the necessity to take a stand against that. And that's right. That's a good thing to be doing when it comes to Nazis or Scientology or the Moonies or the Jehovah's Witnesses. Is these are destructive groups by metrics that we can look at, that we can provide evidence for, that we can show is that way. Okay. So, yeah, what's right, but the problem, of course, there being that what's right today is wrong tomorrow. Okay? And this is why, you have to come full circle, because there's one last point I want to make on this, and then we'll see about taking a couple calls if anybody wants to call in. 984-214-4154, by the way, is the number. Here's where we come full circle on this, okay? And this is kind of the whole point I wanted to make going all the way around on this, is I used to have the idea that this sort of, you could be above it all. You could kind of critically think in such a way that you didn't have to choose sides, or you could sort of have this perspective above it all. And theoretically, that's true, but realistically, it's not. Practically speaking, it's not. It is better, and it is more right, I think, in the real world to take stands, to draw a line in the sand and go, no, I'm not okay with this. And even if you're wrong, it's still better to have that point of integrity. And maybe we might even go so far as to use the word honor here. This is important. I think this is a very, very important moral value and moral stance. And always tempered with the idea that you could be wrong. That's the important part. That's the key to the whole thing, is always being willing to go, well, this is what I say, this is what I think, but I'm always willing to take a new look at it. That's the right thing to do, because that allows change and progress to happen. And it's going to happen whether you want it to or not. The people who get run over by progress and change are the people who are obstinate, who just refuse to change no matter what. And they see that as a virtue. And in the bigger picture, it's, not really. Okay, so, but why do we have to give rights to Nazis? Why do we have to give rights to Scientologists anyway? What's the answer to that question? If we come full circle here and go, okay, well, we know it's not okay to just deny them rights or take away their rights, but why? Because once you open the door to make any exception to these rules, it's the slippery slope to nothing. It really is. This kind of thing about human rights is one of the very few things I believe that is an absolute. It's an all or nothing. Either everybody's got it or nobody, for all practical purposes, has it. Because once you make an exception, then you can make another one, and then you can make another one. And you and I all know that culturally, psychologically, sociologically, history proves to us, present time proves to us that given that opportunity, there's no group out there that will not take that opportunity to walk through that door and strip those people that they don't like of their rights. And today, maybe it's Nazis and we all go, yeah, absolutely. And tomorrow, it's you, or it's somebody adjacent to you, or it's something that's not so destructive, but an argument can be made that it is. You know this. You know this is how people operate. We really can't be trusted is kind of what I'm saying, right? Because again, those morals and those emotional needs, they overtake us, especially in the moment. We can justify anything anytime we want. We all know this. We should know this. This has been a theme of my channel for a long time, that there is no atrocity too atrocious that we can't justify it. And I just gave you a whole set of examples out of Scientology and that I lived. I was a horrible person. There's no question about it. And now I hope I'm not, What changed? Well, I got the hell out of that bubble world and took a bigger look at things. And one of the things you see very quickly in the cult world, if you're being honest, is that every group has these characteristics connected with it. The us versus them, the black and white thinking, the we're better, they're worse. This is actually an ingredient of any group. It's just a matter of how extreme are these ideas. Are they tolerant? Are they going to tolerate other groups that are different from them? Or are they going to have the idea that those groups need to be done away with and take measures to do so? And if they start going in that direction, we start calling them destructive. And they're dialing it up, right? And they're dialing up their extremism, and they're dialing up their passion, and they're dialing up their moral principles. And we're the best, and everybody else isn't, and all of that. So we can't trust people is kind of the bottom line there. As awful as that might sound, it's just being realistic. And this is why rights have to be universal. The only people who won't really agree with you on that, I would fear to say, would be people who are more interested in hurting or harming or destroying some subgroup of the population than they are in recognizing that we all need to get along and be tolerant and understanding of our differences, because and this is becoming harder and harder as a conversation to have in the world right now, which is why I feel obligated to have it, is we've got to be able to tolerate these differences between us. And when we can't tolerate them, we have to be able to fall back on these concepts of rights. It's the only thing we've got that protects all of us from the tyranny of many of us. And it's the thing that maybe allows for the possibility of these smaller cults to form, but it would also ensure a playing field where the cults can't get out of control, where they can't go too far, because we recognize rights exist and that you don't get to violate your members' rights. And this is even bad in America. I mean, we see the court cases and stuff. We don't really have a full recognition of this even here in our Western nations, but at least we have concepts of it. At least we have a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That is way more than what they have in the Philippines or in China or in North Korea. Or in the Middle East. The whole concept of human rights, they're not even at that level yet. So at least we're there. At least we've made that much progress. And I think we can keep pushing and make more if we're more interested in all of us making it rather than just some of us making it, that kind of thing. So there's, I don't know. That was kind of the whole thinking on the whole thing, the sort of full circle concept of it that I wanted to share with you guys. It's 100% right and correct and true to take a stand against groups or individuals who are violating people's human rights, who are violating the law, who want to hurt, who want to destroy, who want to deceive, who want to take advantage of, who want to coercively control others. It's 100% correct to take a stand against that, while at the same time recognizing that that human rights and the recognition of law and rights must be universal, or they don't matter at all. And we can't get so far on our high horse or dig these lines in the sand so deep that we, fall into them and end up ruining everything for everybody. That's kind of how I was thinking about things, and wanted to share that. Good or bad, right or wrong, I don't know, but that was sort of the thinking for this show. Wow, we got all the way. I cannot believe how fast the time goes once I get going on this. Wow. But no calls came in the queue, so I guess we're not going to have any calls this week, and that's okay. I guess we'll just start wrapping up the show here. And Museum of Tolerance, absolutely. Exactly, X-Scion, not acceptance. Exactly. Big difference. Big difference. You don't have to agree with other people in order to tolerate and acknowledge that they can continue to exist. X-Scion asks a question here, which I'll go ahead and answer. Have you seen a phenomenon of more and more YouTubers jumping onto the Scientology bandwagon because it draws clicks and views on their channel? If so, what do you think about that? Ultimately, my answer to the question is 2 thumbs up. Okay? I want more exposure of Scientology, and I factually almost don't care how it happens, or how many people get on board, or how they're putting the messaging out there. I just want more awareness of this. What I would not like to see is an echo chamber. What I don't want to see is the glorification of sensationalist content or curved content or hostile content that makes fun of or ridicules people in a sort of a degrading way. That's not, I have my own personal animosity about that. I have my own opinions about that. You guys know how I approach this topic. I approach it from a higher point of view of, and that doesn't put me on a pedestal. Please understand my words, right? It's different. It's not necessarily better, because let's look at the numbers, right? My content does not appeal to as many people as some of the other YouTubers put content out there that is very different from what I do. And I have to acknowledge and appreciate that more people are drawn to that. And if through that, they learn about the abuses of Scientology, get up and do something about it, vote, talk to their Congress people, write to the IRS, demand change. If they do something effective with that information, that's what we want. And that's all I want. So in that sense, I'm very supportive of all the voices joining the chorus. I've been doing this for a long time, longer than most other people out there who are on YouTube. And not everybody. I mean, Karen's been doing this longer than me. Tori's been doing this for a hell of a lot longer than me. Tony's been doing this longer than me. So I'm not the OG on this. I have said from day one, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. I just named some of them. And we can go back even earlier, pre-YouTube, to Jerry Armstrong, Lawrence Wallersheim, and a laundry list of people whose names I can't even all remember right now, who really took serious shellackings so that I could have the ability to do what I'm doing. And so does Aaron, and so does Tony, and so does so many other people now who are out there. Apostate Alex, Poe on the Go. I think there's a few other channels that are just recently springing up. I know Amy Scobie now has a channel. Janice is doing stuff. I mean, I see this is happening. I don't watch all that stuff, but I see it happening. And I welcome all of it. I want all of it. I just, my preference, my favorite, I wish that we had educational, more of a thrust toward education, but I have to acknowledge, I have to swallow my pride and also acknowledge that not everybody wants that kind of level of in-depth look at Scientology. They don't necessarily, it's not as shallow as just wanting the train wreck of it. They want to know. They want to know what's going on. They want to know why it's going on, but they're not really so curious that they end up at my channel where they get the deep dives. John Atak's channel, similarly, he does educational deep dives on this material, and and his views are not anywhere near what some of the other channels are. We just don't appeal to people that way, and I don't like that. I wish it was different, but it is what it is, and I got to deal with that. So that's kind of how I think about that. Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, that's true, Debbie. Absolutely. In terms of the podcast downloads, that's true. I do have a larger audience than what it shows on YouTube. I do. That's true. Thanks for reminding me about that, Debbie. So, and I know that that you guys are here because you love this stuff and you love what I'm putting out, and I am so thankful that I have an audience and that I have the opportunity to do this and that I get to do this every week. It's the dream job for me. This is so aligned with my purpose and what I want to do with my life. So everything I've said here is in appreciation of you guys, not the other way around. All right. So I guess, it's 7:01. I guess we should wrap up. So thank you very much, guys, for coming around. Let's do our wrap up stuff. First off, of course, we have our critical thinking cards. Let me draw one at random. Oh, come on, really? Your bias is confirmation bias, the one we talk about all the time. You favor things that confirm your existing beliefs. This bias we all have. In spades. We are primed to see and agree with ideas that fit our preconceptions and to ignore and dismiss information that conflicts with them. We're primed for that. And this is why I say critical thinking, it's a discipline. You got to train your mind. The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. Richard Feynman. Great quote. Okay, so this weekend, you guys have got a great podcast dropping tomorrow. It's about tax exemption in churches. Yep, definitely talk about Scientology in there. It's a woman, Liz LaPointe, joined me for this one. She's a fellow podcaster and a YouTuber. And so she and I have a discussion about churches, and we actually make some interesting arguments for and against. I hope you guys will check it out. The purpose of that podcast is a little food for thought, and I'd like to know what you all think about it. So let me know in the comments. And then Sunday, we will have a pre-recorded Q&A. I will not be going live this week. And then Monday, we'll have our Straight Up and Vertical episode. At least that's the plan right now. So watch for that on Monday. And then next week, now that I am back from this trip and kind of back in the groove, I'm going to try to do some YouTube shorts. I've got a whole list of them that I wanted to get done, and it's taken me way too long to get to those. And a bunch of other stuff, of course. I've got podcasts in the queue. I got a lot of content right now. So I hope you guys will keep watching and keep enjoying and keep being educated, informed, and entertaining by this channel. So thank you very much, guys. These comments are just awesome. You guys are the best. I love you. Thank you, Dasuko. All right, guys, let's go ahead and wrap up. We'll see you very soon.